Hey up, Noir Vortex. Not done one of these philosophy videos for a while, so I thought I'd just have a. What I usually do in these philosophy vids, to be honest, is I'll just start off on a thought or a thread and go from there. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about, I guess, the metaphysical, a little bit about metaphysics, and I guess, like, based on recent readings such as Phillip Mainlander, obviously Nietzsche, going further back in my reading philosophy, and then various religious texts or religious beliefs that I might know about or have some awareness of, the whether those religious systems function, such as Buddhism, Christianity, some aspects of Judaism and Islam as well. So I don't know, it's going to be an interesting video in some respect, and I'll probably just, like I said, I'm going to be riffing quite a lot, so it's on, but now I'm waffling too much. So Mainlander's metaphysics is mostly interesting due to the fact that it doesn't necessarily negate God, but it has a completely different concept of what that word means, really. So, and it's basically squaring up some themes you find in Christian writings, such as the Big Bang, like Big Bang, Genesis. You know, there will be there. God said that there'll be light, and then there was light. But it removes the idea of the judging patriarch, right, that you see in most Abrahamic religions. So that, and you have that across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which are all part of the same tradition, right? The Abrahamic monotheistic tradition. Now, Judaism, or I think it possibly was Zoroastrianism, I can't remember what it, but basically Judaism's the first monotheistic religion where you had the idea of the Yahweh, or this patriarchal father figure type God, who, you know, that there also being different realms that we are cast into according to how we behave on this plane of reality, right? The earth, reality, existence. And, you know, from there, obviously, you get the New Testament as well of Jesus, and he atones for mankind's sins and dies for our sins and all that. And then there should be a way to ascend to a state called heaven through Jesus Christ, who sacrificed for humanity. And then, of course, you've got Islam, which is the newest of those three traditions of the monotheistic Abrahamic religions, which I know less about, but I've read a bit of the text, and obviously shares a lot of similarities in terms of, Genesis, Adam and Eve, temptation, all that stuff. Anyway, so going back to Mainlander, and his idea of the God that destroys itself or fragments into pieces and that we're all living inside its corpse is kind of an interesting one metaphysically. It kind of reverses or inverts the traditional, I guess, like Abrahamic patriarch God view to the, this isn't a living consciousness or being anymore with like some sort of judging, or it's an utterly impartial, literally dead force, which I think is kind of interesting, because if you actually view it in the frame of, so like according to modern physics cosmology, right, there's dark energy or dark matter that comprises a huge amount of the mass of the universe, right, but we don't actually know what it is, or we've never been able to detect it from what I understand, right, and I'm not a physicist, but basically just drawing on that thought. And this is kind of interesting if you think about the metaphysics that Mainlander describes in his book, because philosophy of redemption, sorry, brain fart then, because that kind of sounds, I mean, intuitively similar to, not necessarily literally true, but it sounds similar to that idea of like obviously, as far as we can tell, the universe is expanding, right? So that is, that's given as evidence for the the initial event that started off everything, right? And I mean, this gets really, when you actually overthink a lot of the stuff, it gets really, really, when you get into the philosophy of what is consciousness, what produces this sensation of me being here now, in this quite strange scenario where I'm actually talking to a camera and, I exist, I have there's the body, and then there's the consciousness, which is presumably being produced by the brain, but we don't actually fully understand where it comes from, right? And this is, obviously like a huge issue or like debate within, which is the truer representation of reality, right? Is it the physical, the world, the materialist world that we live in? So I was born almost 40 years ago now. I'm almost 40. So over 40 years ago, I was born into this world, and I came to exist, and I slowly started to develop consciousness, and I have a conscience as well, and like morality and ethics, and my own set of ethics, and how do I try and deal with people in the world, my own experiences which inform me as an individual. But then if you subscribe obviously to the materialist version of that, then the sad reality of that is that I will probably die in about 30 or 40 years. My consciousness will die with my brain, which will, you can view that poetically, I suppose. I mean, on my kind of pantheistic understanding of, in my own philosophical framework, right? I don't think it's necessarily, how is that a bad thing? But I think I will have, it's almost, you could analyze it as well through the Nietzschean lens of like the eternal return, except without the return, actually, to be honest. So, in Nietzsche's eternal return, you have one life that you live over and over and over again, so you're condemned to the same life, but it happens again and again. There's no other change or variation in it, right? And the challenge that Nietzsche obviously puts forth in that idea is that you have to live the same life, the same regret, the same joys, the same passions, the same highs. So it's a call to live life at its fullest, and like almost like Diyoniusian, which he used to talk a lot about in his work, ecstasy of experience, right? But Dionysus is actually quite a dark figure as well in like Greek mythology. It's not just the Dionysian cults. They destroyed themselves with their like hedonistic behaviors, right? You can. There is a certain, like, I understand the appeal of hedonism in some respects, but again, like, when it actually gets taken to a certain extreme, it actually destroys. I mean, if you think of, like, popular hedonists in culture, right, so, I don't know. Russell Brand's actually quite a good example, because, obviously, he gained quite a cultural force and as an influencer, actually, in recent contemporary history, but then it was revealed obviously that he was quite public about the fact that he was a sex addict, to his credit. It was never like something that he hid, and I think he did talk about it publicly, but then obviously as a result of his hedonistic drug taking and his dealings with women as well, like which were obviously like as there has been claims about anyway, that he was crossed boundaries and allegedly sexually assaulted women, right? So where do I go from there, man? This is quite tough topics to talk about, I suppose. But anyway, like let me think. Where was I even? So we'll just go back to something else, just because that's a big grim thing to talk about. Again, I'm just using that as an example of, someone who you could argue went full 100% like hedonistic enjoyment of life and sense of, but it hurt people and it destroyed people and it ruined their lives. So, is the fallout of doing that worth the price? Right, that you're ruining other people's lives and. Invariably, just by existing, you're going to be having some small effect on other people's lives, whether it's through the work that you do, or something goes wrong as a result of that, or maybe even an offhand comment you make one day, or a mistake, or whatever else. Well, we don't obviously exist in isolation, right? We are stuck in our own heads in many respects as well, but we do not exist in isolation. Our actions can have positive or negative effects on everybody else, right? And that can be probably measured even statistically, right? So, I don't know. I mean, taking this to a, like, obviously religion provides a very clear framework of how you are supposed to act in terms of your ethics, your behaviours, your expression of desire in society, like how you interact with others. I mean, all of the Abrahamic religions are basically just law books. They're a primitive form of lawmaking, really, if you were to think about it in that sense. I mean, they literally are. I mean, this is often doesn't really get talked about that much in terms of religion. It's like essentially religions are books of law, right? That's one of the main things they are, apart from a book of stories which basically describe the moralities of those laws and the justification for them, right? That's actually mostly what religion is. It's a set of laws that people subscribe to, and then God is, the kind of manifestation of the ultimate expression of that law, if you will, or the ultimate ideal. It's very Platonic. All of those religions are, to be honest. Like, they all relate back to Plato's theory of forms, which, if you know about that, is basically the idea that everything has a perfected form, and then there are varying expressions of that form which are less perfect. I think I'm not butchering that idea too much, but that's a basic idea from Plato about forms. So they exist somewhere in like metaphysical reality, like the perfect version of the thing, which is kind of an interesting idea, I suppose. I mean, obviously there is. I mean, if you try and relate this also to ideas around parallel universes, quantum reality, quantum mechanics, all that sort of thing, like maybe every second there is an unfolding of this time. Time and space are connected. They exist in the same way, and we're existing within it. Yeah, what's your brain when you really think about it? Anyway, I was going back to the pantheistic thing. So yeah, my basic belief is like, obviously I don't know. It's not a thing. I don't think it's like faith with my pantheism. It's not a faith. It's just what I think is most likely to be true, if I'm honest. So I think at the very least, the material which makes me up ultimately will return to the earth in some form, or I'll be like dust. Now there's no essence of my consciousness that gets preserved there necessarily, but like I'll just get recycled by the universe, right? Because the thing is, we are apes with anxiety that exist in this universe, but we are the thinking edge of the universe, right? I do really believe there is something in that notion of the fact that we are actually a part of the universe that was able to become sentient and start thinking, and which is kind of amazing, really. Like, we are the universe experiencing itself. I think there is something in that, right? I think that, again, that pantheistic cosmological notion of us, humanity, is, I think, kind of interesting. Obviously that's found expression in art as well. I mean, think of something like the Vitruvian man, like the universal man, this idea that started emerging in the Enlightenment era and the Renaissance about the universal human spirit, or there being something novel about us as a species. Because, I think about how many species there are on the planet, right? We happen to be the most diversified, most successful species. So, we're the apex of Darwinian evolution by definition, because we have spread the most, reproduced the most. Even scientifically speaking, I think that by any stretch of imagination is the definition of success. Interestingly, actually, you could think about this obviously there's a lot of speculation at the minute that maybe we're going to start replacing ourselves with AI, or that that's even a possibility. And who knows? Maybe I think, again, this is going to be fatalistic, but maybe an apex species like us who can develop tools and then more advanced tools and technology, we eventually do just replace the paradigm of like Darwinian natural selection with something different, which is more based around a technical base of technology. But then you can easily critique that, because human beings are actually quite adaptable, right? We've adapted across an ice age, presumably, and thousands of years in different conditions, and we're not even been in the same form. some of us, I mean, obviously we're Homo sapiens now, but I mean, Homo erectus, you've had the Neanderthals, sorry, I can't never pronounce that word. Different like types of man. I mean, we're just the most up-to-date version. I mean, we're wise man, basically, is what Homo sapiens translates man who is wise. But yeah, maybe we will transition now into, I mean, in a sense, actually, it's interestingly to see how much like the culture wars has been emphasizing transness as a kind of such a culture wars sticking point, because you could argue in some respects that trans people are the first people, or one of the first large groups of people in any like significant number who are actually altering their own bodies and chemistry in order to achieve something that they feel matches their inner essence, right? And that is why I think it's such a hotly contested issue, because it is, it kind of crosses so many different areas, you know, of like the people value, I suppose. But anyway, yeah, I mean, we're moving into like age where, I mean, we have kind of on a very non-physical way already in it. Like, we spend so much time in this space, this simulated space, this virtual space that let's not forget, like 20 years ago, it didn't exist in the same form. I mean, yeah, obviously you still had internet, but it was so much less ubiquitous, and the ubiquitous nature of technology means that the sort of barriers collapse between the real and the meta real, right? So the physical and the metaphysical have like morphed into some strange amalgamation of both, right? Which is kind of strange and it's never happened before. I mean, I'm sure we're going to get all sorts of new and unique forms of delusion or like psychosis that will emerge. I mean, there's already been AI-based delusions that people develop, you know. So that'll just. But you know, like going back to what I was going to say, that the reason I'm not entirely convinced, or I'm fairly skeptical anyway, that an emergent form of, say, an artificial life or AI could come alive and become dominant is because, now again, I might be making a few assumptions here, but it's because they need a base level of, they can't reproduce for a start. That's one thing. I mean, I'm sure you could get a machine that could artificially reproduce, by which I mean, you know, just literally create copies of itself through material that's somehow bunged in. But unless something's organic, from what I understand, and I'm not a biochemist, so I don't know fully, but as far as I can understand, you can't, unless you get robots that somehow are partially organic, there's no way that they could naturally reproduce. Metal doesn't reproduce, right? Like a metal, the actual base substance of what a robot or a machine is obviously metal, silicone, and circuits and everything else. Something that has to be designed by hand. So even if artificial intelligence, say an absolute disaster scenario, right? We build these hyper advanced AIs, and then we're stupid enough to build a bunch of robots that we house them in, and these robots go mental, kill off 90% of the population. You have a small clique elite of 10% who maybe stay alive for a bit longer, and then these AIs encased in robotic exoskeletons like Terminators or whatever basically just decide to kill all those people off. Now, we're all dead. At this point, every human being is dead. There's maybe a few tiny amount of people who somehow survive in the worst conditions possible, just eking out an existence. But the robots now, and they adapt. These people go into the sewers. They go into the deepest. Absolute horrendously, like they become like sewage people who live in the sewers. But argument's sake, they do that. Now the machines, they need to have consistent energy source, and they're hugely intelligent, so they can keep on doing that, and they're for a moment. Maybe they even develop space travel. But things break, and they can repair them bit by bit, but they have no real reliable way that just in any conditions that they can just get two of them together to reproduce, right? Because they're robots, they're machines, they're metal, they're made of metal, and then they're not built to last. This is the other thing people often forget about technology. Technology, it does not last. Like the computer hardware will, unless you maintain it, it just gets bad. It gets we're talking about components here, motherboards, circuitry. It doesn't stay in a good condition forever. It needs maintaining. So the only way I think that you'd ever have, and again, I might be making a ton of assumptions here. I'm just having interesting thoughts. The only way I could ever see that AI as like a sentient living force would ever, I don't even think gain ascendancy, but I think it would. The only way it'd ever like exist as alongside us would be alongside us, yeah. And I think it would be like some sort of synthesis of man and machine, like cyborgs, really, more than anything else. And then people have been experimenting with that for years. It's not something that appeals to me. Like transhumanism and all that stuff is not something I'm interested in the theory of it, but in terms of actually living it, I'm not sure. I think though, if I actually consider this, like if I found out next week that I'm going blind, right? My eyes are conking out. They're already bad, but they're actually, I'm going to lose my eyesight in a year, but they can give me some like sort of cyberpunk type eyes, like which will give me like artificial vision. Pardon me. I think why not? I mean, in that scenario, obviously you've got nothing to lose because you're going to lose your eyesight anyway. I mean, why wouldn't you get like some cool like? I mean, I wear glasses anyway. It's already an adaptation of technology that I wear on my face all the time. So just probably like this, except it'll be more obvious, but it would be probably look better, like as well, in terms of like it'll look similar-ish to what my actual face looks like, or whatever. Or it'll be like this, but just with darkened glasses on it. Doesn't feel like too much of a bad thing. But anyway, I mean that'll be interesting to see all the. I mean, like I need to read a lot more into like Nick Land and Accelerationism and all that, just to get, not because I necessarily agree with all that philosophy, but I think it's worthwhile investigating. For anyway, that's been a bit scatterbrained, but I think I've explored a few little interesting topics there. I really do enjoy talking about philosophy. I just don't do it enough. I always forget, but I may do another one another time. I mean, I don't get any viewers on these, but if you have got anything of interest out of that and thoughts to chew on, let me know what you think.